Welcome. Hola a todas, bienvenidas. Welcome to, on behalf of the WeInvest board and team, to our event today on a super relevant topic, I think, which has to do with public speaking. It's something that all of us, go through in our day-to-day life in some way or another. So we're super excited to have it as our second webinar here within the WeInvest community in a series of webinars and chats that we want to, host for the benefit of our community on both soft and hard skills. So excited to have another one. Today in particular, we have the incredible Rania Anderson to talk to us about the 3 secrets of successful speaking. So we're super excited about that in particular. And before I give Rania the formal introduction that she absolutely deserves, I'll just take a few seconds to comment on the fact that some of you might have had the chance to read the blog post that I wrote on public speaking and my background in theater, which kind of led to an enjoyment or an excitement I have around the topic. That being said, I don't think it's ever easy. It's not something that's quick. It doesn't happen overnight. And there is always so much more to learn. I know that my particular experience came with many, many mistakes, both on stage and at work. So there's always room for improvement. But without further ado, I'd love to introduce Rania Anderson, who has dedicated decades to transforming the way people lead and succeed. She started her career at Bank of America, where she obtained a senior leadership position. And from there, her career blossomed in many directions. First of all, she's an author of 2 incredible books. First, We, Men, Women, and the Decisive Formula for Winning at Work. And second, Undeterred, the 6 success habits of women in emerging economies, both which are currently in my Amazon shopping cart, and I'm super excited to read. After that, additionally, Rania is an international keynote speaker, and she's spoken to thousands of men and women across Fortune 100 companies globally. Additionally, she established an executive coaching business in 1997 and has been on the forefront and the front lines of coaching world leaders ever since. And if that weren't enough, she's also an angel investor, and in 2008 established an angel investment network as co-founder that focuses on investing in women-led businesses. So without further ado, I'd love to pass the mic on to Rania. We are so excited to learn from you today, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'll tell you more about this as we go along, but I have been privileged to be connected to some of you. Sylvia, I'm seeing you now on the screen. It makes me so happy, since 2012, and that came from a speaking capacity where I was trying to get myself established to write my first book, and I had no connections in Latin America, and I was welcomed with open arms by Marta and Sylvia, and that led to some really amazing connections over the years. So something I'll touch on as we talk, but it's always a pleasure to reconnect with you.
Thank you.
All of us here are experts in speaking and have a lot to contribute. So I'm going to make this session very interactive and engage you in a variety of ways, because I think the learning will come from all of us, not just me. My favorite story about speaking comes from, oops, let me see here. From my days when I was writing my first book, Undeterred, and I met Manar Al-Munif. She is a Saudi woman, and she has her PhD in molecular oncology and genetics, whatever that is. And she told me this amazing experience that she had. She was invited to speak to a group, and when she arrived to speak, the organizers of the group met her outside the auditorium, and they said, Dr. Al-Munif, when you come to the stage, you're going to it's very simple. You're going to see a screen. You're going to stand behind the screen and you're going to give your talk. Okay, got it? She said, what? They said, if there's a screen on the stage, you'll stand behind the screen. She goes, well, why would I do that? And they said, well, because there are some men in the audience that don't want to see you. She said, well, that's ridiculous. What do you mean they don't want to see me? No, they don't want to see you. Well, do they want to hear what I have to say? Oh, of course, you're the foremost expert in this topic. And there's hundreds of people here waiting to hear from you. She said, well, I'm not standing behind the screen. And they got into an argument and she was about to leave. It was a big fiasco. They kept telling her it was not a big deal. She kept telling them, of course, it's a big deal. I'm not going to do that. Anyway, she had this idea at the last minute and she said, okay, it's not a problem. I got it. So she opened the door and she spoke to the audience and she said, I'll be coming on the stage in just a few minutes. If there is anybody who doesn't want to see me, please take your chair and turn it to face the back of the room. So do you think that anybody did? Of course not, right? And it is this tenacity that all of us have, all of you have in your markets all around Latin America, of finding a way to get done what you want done. Sometimes we have to honor the culture that we are in, but we still have to find a way. She went on to give a great presentation. And as you see on the slide, today she is the president and CEO of the Middle Eastern region for General Electric. She's a fascinating woman, and it's a really great example. I'm again just privileged to be with you. I, like Natalia, didn't come to speaking, just in a quick and easy way. I think of myself more of a writer. I know I don't present that way, but I am much more of an introvert, and I would rather just be sitting and writing and thinking. And it is something that I have developed, and I want to share with you some thoughts on how I've done that and the failures that I've had and the strategies that I use. So if you want to open your chat, or you can just unmute yourself for a minute, just throw out really quickly, what are some of your greatest challenges when you have something to present on, whether it's a big presentation, online, a virtual, a podcast, talking to funders, talking to founders. What are you worried about? What are you challenged by? What is the hard part of this for you? Anyone, just post.
For me, is have the ability to engage the people, the public, yes, the audience.
Yeah. Okay. To remain relevant. That's Sylvia. Yeah. We're always trying to stay on top of everything.
Currently, for me, it's the language. If you had told me 2 years ago that I was going to be investing in LATAM speaking in Spanish most of the time, I would have been like, no, that's not my comfort zone. So definitely that area as well.
Great to see you, Rania.
Oh, it's lovely.
My greatest challenge is to see if I can change at least in a small way the people's perception or people's life or whatever. I mean, it's and you can see that in their faces. If there's something that we can do for the others.
It's great. Okay.
For me, I always get nervous 3 days, 4 days before the presentation, and I try not to think about. So sometimes that allow me not to get nervous. But then at the end, I enjoy being there and enjoy the audience. So be prepared, because I get nervous before. So that's the trade-off that I have days before.
And we're going to talk about that as well. And Sylvia, the point you brought up about changing someone and Marta, you engaging. I have a thing that I do whenever I'm speaking, that there is one person in the audience that I am there for that day. And I always find that person, right? They always somehow appear. And I just am motivated by that there is one person that I'm supposed to be there for. And if there's 100 others, great, but for that one person, right? Sometimes less is more. That is huge. We're going to talk about that. That's one of the huge keys of speaking. So Valeria, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah.
For
So
me,
yes,
sorry.
go ahead. No?
I was just going to say that I'm an introvert. So in addition to making sure that I'm saying what I need to say and that I'm conveying the right messages, I'm also trying to fake being comfortable.
I can relate. So I want to reveal right up front the secrets. So you might have heard this. I learned it in the 1990s from a boss that I had. And the secret of speaking is, can you connect to someone intellectually, emotionally, and can you ask them to do something, to take some action? If you hit on each of these things, the emotional connection, the intellectual connection, and what to do, you're going to have a great presentation or talk or even just a conversation with someone one-on-one, right? The adage that we say, you've probably heard, is people will forget what you said, but they will never forget the way you made them feel, right? And when you go to hear a presentation that is missing one of these things, right? Something falls flat, something doesn't work. I remember hearing a woman speak who was so powerful. She was talking about the soul of money, and she was trying to do some fundraising, and she never asked the audience to engage or to take some action or to do something. So it was a great, inspiring speech, but nothing happened, right? Sometimes people are too much in the head, right? They're giving you all this data and numbers, and it's interesting, but you don't feel invested in it. The goal of speaking is to take the audience on a journey from where they are today to where you want them to be at the end. In your case, and I'm going to talk a lot more about this, you all are all experienced speakers and you have many ways that you speak. So my role, as I think about it, is what is it I want to leave you with? And as I prepared for today, I thought, okay, I have to give them something interesting or new they haven't thought about before. So what is it going to be? And we'll see. You can test me at the end and see if I've done that. The purpose is, when you are going to engage with people, Marta, what you talked about, and this head, heart, and hands, is storytelling. And I think the mistake that we make is to start presentations with a lot of stuff at the beginning. I am so-and-so, thank you so-and-so, it's so great to be here, blah, blah, blah. We spend so much time in the setup, and already we are losing the audience. We must start the presentation in the way that I did, with a story that captures the audience and says, okay, I'm going to start to listen. And what is this story? And you can see on the screen, there's lots of kinds of stories that you could have, right? You could talk about a challenge, a crisis, some decision-making you're going to make, but you always want to focus on the storytelling. That's what people remember, and that's how you really engage people. I have to go back and force myself to think about what is the story that is going to illustrate the example that I want to take, right? As I go along, can come back to each of these things and talk more deeply about them. I want to give this overview and then open things up for conversation. Another key, most critical key to speaking is it's not about you, right? It's not about you. We already know who you are. That's why you were invited to speak. That's why you're presenting. That's why you're there. People can read your bio. They can look at your LinkedIn. They can hear, and we don't want to hear all this stuff about you. The audience is there, and you have to make them want to care, right? You have to make them want to care about what you're talking about, and you have to figure out what it is they care about and to focus on that. So what I want to do next is to look at various audiences that you speak to and to pull out some things. And I have some thoughts, and you'll see them coming up on the slides, but I want to also engage you in that, which is Steve Covey says, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. What is the main thing of that audience, right? If you know what the main thing is, then you build your presentation about that. And you do, I can't remember who put in the chat to not talk about too many things. That's one of the biggest mistakes we make. When you know what is the main thing, you will focus your presentation on that, and that will be it. So when we're speaking to fundraise, the main thing, in my opinion, is what's the opportunity, right? Would someone say something else to add to that? What's the main thing when you're fundraising? What's the main thing the audience wants? I know it's hard to put in one word, but would you add something or put something different there? So I have a good friend, Darcy Howe. Some of you might have encountered her. She runs a venture capital fund. It's one of the largest female-led venture capital funds in the US. And she's the managing partner. And when she started her fundraising, it was really difficult for her to do that because it is a very niche type of fund. And what she did really well was connect for people who were skeptical what the opportunity was in our community for that fund. And it was really all about the community and not about the fundraising. And it was that which made the people care. When we're speaking to your LPs, right, and your other investors in the community, that the main thing for me is progress, right? Like what have you done since we last talked? What is the performance that you have, right? And that is the lens for which you view that. Again, if someone thinks that when you're talking to LPs or other investors, there's something more important than progress, please put it in chat or unmute yourself and share that. I want us to be thinking about this main thing collectively together. When you're speaking to your funding partners, right, and your investment committee, it's very much a give and take about you're giving them some information, but you're also seeking their input if you're about to make a decision together. And so it's sort of much more of a persuasive type of speaking engagement. And it's thinking about how do you make them think in a different way. When I co-founded the Angel Investor Network that I did, it's been 12 years now, we gathered a group of women in our community to talk about this idea. And one of the things that I spoke to them about was how in the city where we live, the region where we live, there were many older women who had done some remarkable things in the community around abused women, around unemployed women, around philanthropy, around foundations, around healthcare, around voting rights. And the city was known for these amazing older women who had made a huge difference. And so what I said to the group of women that were there was, what is it that our generation will do, right? What will our generation be known for? Are we just going to run the things that the previous generation started, or will we start our own new thing? And that led to that conversation of generating the exchange. Speaking to founders for me is about the partnership, right? That we have between the money and the idea, between our knowledge and the founder's knowledge. It's about the expectations that we have of each other, right? And so if I come to my founders always as a partner with them, instead of telling them what to do, if I come through that lens, the conversation becomes much more equal, much more interesting. It's where somebody talked about building trust, right? That's how we build trust. When we're speaking at board meetings or we're participating in a board meeting, this is an interesting one. There's a lot of things at stake, but I find that one of the things that we don't really recognize sometimes at board members is that the board is a team and it wants the board members to be good team players. And it's hard when you're speaking in a board meeting to keep that relationship with your board members, but also be pushing the board or bringing new ideas. And it's that thing that we have to balance in our speaking at board meetings that really matters. And we can talk about, are you being heard at board meetings? Are you being ignored? Are people taking your ideas? Is it a team? So you can ask me questions about that and we can focus on that as well. I know some of you are being asked to be on podcasts and to be interviewed in various ways. And the main thing about a podcast is that people can come in and listen to a podcast for a few minutes and then they drop it, or they might stay on the whole thing, but you've got to have it be like in scenes where you're telling different stories so someone can listen for a few minutes and hear the gist of what you have to say, and you can make a whole concrete statement, a key point that you're making through those series of multiple stories. You can't think of it as the podcast from the beginning to end because it's not how people listen to it. We all participate and lead panels, and I think this is one that's really interesting to think about. The biggest mistake I see people making as they moderate panels is to think that they, the moderator, are the main, the main thing, the most important thing, when they are not, right? It's the panelists are the main thing. And what to make a panel really interesting is when we bring different views to the table, right? To make the audience think about a topic in a different way. I'll never forget a panel that I heard years ago up in Canada, and the panel was about money, and they had a banker, a Buddhist monk, and somebody who was basically like kind of like a communist kind of person, and like a venture capitalist, right? So it made us think about the topic in a very interesting and different way. And really engage the audience to think about money very differently than we had when we first walked in. We're now like living in the world of Zoom, right? And all these virtual presentations. And that is so much about the energy that we bring and this engagement. And how do we draw the audience in when they are multitasking, when they are thinking about so many other things, when we are not there with our energy in person, right? And it's like you have to put your energy on steroids. And I think it's Lucia, who you talked about being an introvert, right? It's a challenging thing to do. So I'm going to move from talking about like how I think about, that was an example of, if I'm talking to a certain group, I'm always going to ask myself, what's the main thing? And to focus myself on that. Then I'm going to start getting ready for the presentation. And I'm going to ask myself, what is the main point that I want to make? And how simple can I make it? In this case today, I decided, while there's a million things I can tell you about speaking, I wanted to really tell you about this head, heart, hands, and about this main thing, right? And then I'm going to let you, the audience, ask me questions about other things you want to know, but I'm going to focus myself there. So once I know that, then I think about, how do I create an experience? One of the world's most renowned speaking coaches, for huge presenters, her name is Nancy Duarte, and she always talks about something they will always remember, a star moment, something they will always remember. And starting with that hook, right? Starting with that idea and taking that one idea more deeply. So I wanted to to demonstrate that for you today with the story of Dr. Manar, right? It's a fascinating story. You're probably never going to forget that, right? And every time you go up on a stage, you're going to think, thank God, I don't have to deal with those kinds of things, right? So what's your star moment that you're going to speak about? And you want to have that. And Marta, that's the engagement part, right? We're going to show and tell both. We want to demonstrate, we're going to give information, statistics, humor, and we're that first start of it is the critical, important part. If we never give examples, then people don't really understand what we're talking about. So people like to ask me about, do you use slides? Do you not use slides? And the answer is always, it depends. If you use slides, you want to have a few slides. You want them to look good. You never want to read your slides. People can read slides. They can read for themselves. The slides are not there to be prompts to you. They are there as a visual to help the audience get more information than what you're talking about. And different people's minds work in different ways. Some people are going to be looking at the slides. Some people are going to be listening to you. I think it's really nice sometimes when we don't use slides, because then it can be a more even exchange. I have a client now where on their Zoom calls and speaking that I do for them, they like to have, sometimes the slides are up and the slide sharing is going on, and sometimes we stop the slide sharing. So we have this juxtaposition of slides, no slides, slides, no slides. And I think it's an interesting way to engage. I've touched on this very often already in this presentation. Take out things that don't relate. And as I prepared for today, I said to myself, probably 20 times, Rania, take out this slide, this particular slide, because you've already made this point, but I left it in so I could make the point again with you. And because I love how this woman looks, I think she's super engaging. If you're writing, as I know some of you do, this is a really hard thing to do, you know, remove, cull, right? So how do you get the information in your head? And this is a strategy that lots of people use, and it's called having a memory map. And you basically kind of think about your presentation as a map, as a journey that you're taking the audience on. And as you're doing that, you kind of draw where it's going. And it's a way of making the content fit into your head, right? Versus writing it all out. When we write it all out, sometimes we end up wanting to use that as a crutch and to read it. When we have this memory map, it's a different way of engaging our minds. In my case, I have this really strange thing that I do. I always have my notes and my map. They're always sitting next to me and I never look at them. But if I don't have them, I feel nervous. So it's like a security blanket. It's right there in case I need it. And typically I don't need it. But I've had people tell me, well, don't bring it with you. I can't not bring it with me. It's like my little crutch sitting right there. So the key about speaking is to speak rather than to present and to get really formal and to use these, what I call 25-cent words instead of 5-cent words, right? Just simple language. You know, everybody knows you're smart. You don't have to tell them that you're so fancy and that you have this amazing vocabulary and every sentence is perfect. And you want to just speak and think about speaking to one person in the room, right? When I'm speaking to a group of funders or to a group of people I'm fundraising, I want to think about a person that's in the audience and speak directly to that person as if we were just having coffee together. This helps, by the way, if you're more introverted, to think about it from that perspective. And most importantly, to be yourself. And I'm going to bring Susanna into this conversation. One of the things I admire so much about Susanna's speaking, and I've seen her do a lot of it, is she's so funny, right? She tells really cool stories and she does funny things on the stage, and I love that. I'm not a very funny person. So if I try to be like Susanna, I'm going to get more nervous. I'm going to not be able to be, comfortable because it's not who I am, right? So I've got to think about what is my thing and what is the way I speak and how do I do that? When I first started speaking, I kept watching a lot of TED Talks and I thought I should be like that, just super buttoned up. They don't miss a beat. Everything is perfect. Every line, every set. And I found that didn't work for me. That what works for me is to be much more open. And when I'm speaking to a live audience, I often stand at the door to meet people as they're coming in the room. And I talk with them as they're entering. And I begin to weave what I heard from them into my presentation that's already prepared. When I do that, my presentation is not as smooth. It's not as perfect as a TED Talk, but it is more comfortable for me. It is more engaging, I think, to the audience because they're interacting with the content. And so the key of not being less nervous is to be yourself, to know that every single person is nervous. Every single person is nervous. I've never met anyone who gets on a stage who's actually not nervous, right? And to think about how you want to be in a place that's very comfortable for you, right? To anticipate those questions that maybe will trip you up and to be prepared with some answers. To do something, I don't know if you're familiar with Ann Cuddy, who has done a lot of research on power posing. You can also do this in your chair. I see Natalia shaking her head. Many of you may be very familiar with it. If you plant your body strongly, you put your feet down, even if you're in your chair, and you stand in a strong position, I call it, Wonder Woman, right? You actually create testosterone in your body. The hormone of testosterone is being created, and it makes you feel stronger and more capable of being in that position of authority that you already have and that you are in on this stage. Someone asked, if you're not a funny person, is there room for use of humor to overcome? Yes, absolutely. I think if you can use humor, you should try to use it every way that you can, right? And to think about that awkward silence is, I think it's one of the hardest things, right? Sometimes when you have that awkward silence, you feel like you're starting to work very hard. And being able to diffuse the situation with humor is brilliant strategy. I've been known to ask an audience why they're so quiet and what I should do with that. And that sometimes breaks it up. I sometimes talk to like a bunch of tech people, and they're so quiet, it makes me crazy. And so sometimes it's just that they're just quiet, right? So the key is really to think about the main thing that I want to talk about, build my presentation on that, right? It's the center, the core of it, to think about, how am I going to intellectually engage them? How am I going to emotionally engage them? That's the biggest thing. What will make them care about this topic? And then what do I want them to do? I want them to write me a check. I want them to take this action. I want them to tell this in the community, et cetera, et cetera. And then to build your presentation around that, to try not to talk about everything that you know under the sun. So we have about 15 minutes, and I want to turn the conversation over to you. And I think this is where the greatest learning comes, for you to ask questions, unmute yourself. You can put on chat things that you're challenged with, situations you've encountered, anything you want to bring or ideas you want to give each other. Let's just go for it.
I have a question, Rania. Okay, so I love public speaking. I really, at some point, I even wanted to be on TV when I live in New York, so I don't have a problem with that. But one of the things you said, at times for me is difficult because, I don't want to talk about me, and yet people turn the tables also. Tell us about your experience. Tell us about your story, your life story. And for me, it's kind of, can we get going on business issues? Or the other type of speaking that I do a lot, but I'm trying, like at one, I'm having an interview, but it will be on business issues, is when they see you, you're a woman, you're successful, and then the only topic they want you to talk about is gender issues. And so I don't like being pigeonholed. So how do you get out of not making it about yourself and making it about the audience?
That's awesome. So I learned this from someone who does a lot of preparing people for PR.
Okay.
And they describe it like this. They said, you know, the person is going to ask you about the hamburger on your plate, but you want to talk to about the French fries that are on your plate. So you always have to say, the hamburger is next to the French fries. Let me tell you about the French fries. You're going to have to talk about what they said. So it's like you want to give them a little bit and say, you know, thanks for asking about me, and be able to say one sentence or two. And I would love to share with you more after this talk about that. Like you have one sentence that describes it. But the most important thing that I want you to know about me today is about this topic, right? And now you go to talking about the French fries, right? And it's the same with the gender issue. So when people ask me about that, I say, you know, that's a really important topic. Of course, we want to talk more about that. Today's topic is about this. So let me try to talk to you about gender related to, you know, this fund, right? Or the founders that we have, or the whatever, right? And I just keep pivot.
Great, thank you. I will not forget the hamburger and the fries, believe me.
Who else?
I have a simple question. I don't know if I say good. Muletillas is fillers. I want to know how to avoid fillers. In Spanish, it's so common to say, for example, how is the way to avoid these kind of things?
Here, I just did it, right? So we all do it. It's a way of pausing to think. And one of the things that I've tried for myself is to ask somebody to count my fillers and to tell me at the end how many. And when you hear the number, you feel very shocked. And that shock makes you, okay, this is not a good situation. That's one. Two is to try to just close your mouth when you're thinking, and physically just close your mouth, and to see if that will help. The third is to realize that you're going to use those fillers and that you're not trying to eliminate it. You're just trying to reduce it. Okay. And to say to yourself, I'm going to have this goal. I'm going to get better at this, but I'm not going to beat myself up when I use them, because it's okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
What is the type of speaking you are mostly doing, all of you on the call?
For me, it's fundraising.
And what are you, how's it going, and what?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having us here, and your presentation was so clear, and I have like so much work to do now. And I was thinking about like practicing before, because I have like the ideas and then I see the concept, but I think I have like to record myself and to practice and watch me doing it so I become better. And so it has been very helpful to remove everything that is extra, and just what's missing for me is at the end you said, what do you want people to do? Like, you say it just like, are you interested? Like, if you could talk more about building that community, like to involve the people and to make them want to write the check?
Yeah. So I think about fundraising as being a salesperson. I don't know if you think about it that way, but that's how I think about it. You're selling something, right? And I learned really early in my career that bad salespeople sell features, right, of the product, and good salespeople sell benefits of the product.
Okay.
And great salespeople make you curious. So the first is, can you make them so curious about what is this going to be? And I want to be a part of it, right? And part of making people curious about a fund is talking about who else is in the fund and how other experiences, and letting people feel like they don't want to lose, miss out. I think that's part of it. The other part of it that you asked about is what do I ask them to do? Yes, you ask for the order. We would really like for you to be a part of this, and we are accepting investors at this level. If you feel that you are not ready for that yet, I will give them an option of something else that they can do that will keep them in the hook, right? So I'm just going to use a random number. So, you're saying the minimum is $250,000 for the person to write a check, and somebody's not quite ready for that. You might say, well, could you engage with us as a mentor, or could you be a part of this activity, or could you do this, so that you keep them close to you, and maybe they're going to gather more information, and eventually they're going to hopefully be able to write the check.
Oh, thank you. Great insights. Thank you, Rania.
Rania, I have a question. So as a woman, we are everything we have in a box: kids, family, being daughter, and having a husband, everything. And sometimes when I am giving a speech or talking with fundraising, I always want to put personal things into because that's who Jasmine is. But sometimes, so that's, for example, it's one of the things. So sometimes I have something here to say, no, Jasmine, you cannot talk in this speech about your kids because it's not professional. Or they will think that you will not take serious the business, for example. But this is how Jasmine is, and this is how and I will keep doing this. So what do you think about this trade-off of bringing things of your family or things of your kids in a conversation or in a public speaking?
Yeah, I've developed my own thoughts about this topic over the past few years. And this some of you will agree and some will disagree with this. I am tired of trying to do leadership in the way that it was formulated by our parents and our grandparents and by men, right? I want to lead in the way that is authentic to me as a woman and somebody of my experience and background. And so over the past few years, have just said to myself, I'm not going to do the way they did it. I'm going to do the way I want to do it. And if that includes my talking about my family, I'm going to do that. So I would say, do it your way. And I will balance that with, it's not about me, it's about the audience and who is in the audience and what is my purpose of being there today. And is telling this story helping and adding to that or is it not, right? So that will tell me how much of it should I do, right? We don't want to, you know, a reference to your kids or being authentic. We want to know who you are, but we don't want the whole thing to be about that, right? Oh, thank you, Susanna. What else?
Rania, I would love to get your thoughts on like, I really love what you said about it's not about you, it's about the audience, right? And so something that I struggle with depending on my audience is how to deliver a message. For example, like I have what I consider to be like my authentic communication style that I feel comfortable using with Marta or Susana, and like I can talk to them about like anything in any way and just the way that I know how to do it. But for example, I have an all male investment team and there's a lot of diverse, they're fantastic, but it's a different situation. And so I find if I communicate the way I'm most comfortable, I'm not as effective. But if I like communicate, like I almost have to like, it's like a puzzle. If I communicate an XYZ way, I'm gonna get the reward. But then I'm like, this is exhausting. But I'm like, but it works. And so I'm struggling. It's like, how much do you balance, you know, between being effective with your audience? And again, I guess it comes back to authenticity.
Yeah. I think it is exhausting, and it's a constant balancing, right? Of how important is that particular conversation to how much do I need to do, right? And how do I do two things, right? Sometimes I'm going to talk to them the way they want to, but I also want to teach them a different way of communicating that, you know, my second book is a book written for men about how to work with women. Like we're always telling women how to work with men, but we don't tell men how to work with women. And more men want to and need to understand how to work with women because they're working with you on their group, or they have a female boss, right? So it's like you have two jobs. One is to do it their way, and one is to teach them your way so they will be more comfortable with that themselves, and maybe they will become more authentic. So I think it goes down to, okay, this is a critical thing that I have to get this decision. It's really important. I'm going to do a lot of work. And it's not just about the gender thing, right? We'll go back to the introversion, extroversion, or how quickly people make decisions, or how they want information, right? So if I'm talking to a client, I'm going to think about everything about that client and how I'm going to present to them so that I get them to yes. But then there are other topics I'm like, the heck with it. I'm just going to do my thing, and they're going to go with it or not. And hopefully over time we get to a happy medium.
Perfect. Thank you.
I do have a question.
I'm sorry.
Hi. I have a question, and basically is based like, you know, not every meeting that you have, it's like wonderful.
Right.
And you realize that it's not being the best one in your life. So what tip do you use, or something that give us like, okay, you're having a terrible interview or a terrible meeting, something that you say like, okay, change it. How can you change it?
So first I want to just acknowledge that happens a lot to me. And I have this thing where I then beat myself up. You know, I say, oh, I forgot this. I didn't do that. I should have done this. I hate that because it's ridiculous. It's a waste of, maybe it's learning, but it happens to all of us. When if I'm still in the situation, the way that I turn it around is to stop talking and start listening, and to start thinking about the other person instead of me. When I keep thinking about myself, I keep digging the hole bigger and bigger. It gets worse and worse. So I just say, okay, just ask a question, think about this person. What do they want? Or just stop, right? And just acknowledge this isn't going really well. Let's start over. Or how can we make this go more smoothly? Just be authentic and acknowledge it. And I think it turns the situation around.
Good. Well, Rania, we love to hear you. For me, it's a pleasure. All the time it was a pleasure to be with you. I want to say one sentence that I love, that is your sentence, that is almost like this. We need to find the best version of ourselves. No?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love these sentences and I use a lot. And I don't know, I think this was a very good opportunity for all of the women in this meeting, but we love to have you again in the future with another topics, because for example, for me was very, very important to understand what is the difference, another different topic, okay? But which is the difference between mentor and sponsor, okay? For me, was very clear, and I became a mentor. I was very good mentor, but I wasn't a sponsor. Now I understand that I have not the obligation, but the responsibility to be a sponsor of all of these girls that is into this community.
Thank you. I want to just thank you for the privilege of being here, but mostly I want to acknowledge the critically important work that you do. It is brings me so much joy to see your faces and to know the importance of what you're doing in your countries and in your community, and the leadership that you have in changing the world, in changing the future of so many people's lives. What you do is critically important, and I thank you for the work and the sacrifices and the hard things that you do every day. It's a pleasure to be with you. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Bye.